This presentation is on the question, how racist is Slavoj Zizek? We're going to examine this question through subject matter related both to the general concept of justice and universal rights, of humanism, and of what it means that there's a partial, total power of the Marxist metaphysics. I say partial total power by meaning that there's a complex of total power, which certainly one part of it is Newtonian metaphysics and the terms of force, and every term familiar to us as an ordinary person who uses the thinking of physics to understand what's happening in their lives. Just as we can use the concepts of Marx, which are totally in control of historiology, or the manner of doing history of all the rich North Atlantic countries, whereby the theory of the economy has the final word on the production of the personality of what we call the most common word for this, the buzzword, is formation, of the formation of the individual, and the general notion of ideology, where ideology in this simple form means that the factum, or the things that are made, which is to say that we can explain them by telling a story. Who was the parents of this child? Who were the grandparents? Who were the ancestors? Where was the origin of life? What was the origin of the galaxy, etc.? We could tell a story and explain them. This is called factum. And ideology means that you try to appeal to the factum to back up an agenda. So if the agenda, so in Marxism, the agenda, which we still see in the Reaganite Federalist Society and the liberalism, that's the closest to what Marx was teaching, is the notion of socialism as opposed to communism, where socialism means that each worker gets the exact compensation that they're meant to get. So, in other words, the market doesn't create a Bill Gates or a Zuckerberg or monopoly capitalism. So remember, Marx, if you want to understand what Marx was about, he was against monopoly capitalism, just as you find people like that today in sort of Reagan Thatcher type of circles. That's the basic thesis of libertarianism in the current day, is basically this Marxist agenda, which then we could also call an ideology. So how do they back up their ideology? By trying to point to factum, or facts, which back them up. That's the general mode of arguing that we call ideology, in which, according to Marx, our ideology is based on the market forces which formed us as individuals. Now, here's where we get to the question of how racist is Zizek. So how is it that Zizek, when he goes to Althusser, so Althusser's criticism is that we should go to the universal and use it to argue our agenda, in the sense that instead of critiquing the current system, for instance, right to vote, or let's say at the beginning of the American order, the simplest example, the manifest contradiction in the statement, all men are created equal, but then the allowing slavery. So we should go to these universal statements and then make them do what they actually say to do already. That's a part of the Althusserian strategy, which Zizek subscribes to. But the real inner core of it is this. It's the notion that one can sort of step out of the state ideological formation that Althusser has spent so much time propounding on, or propounding, and suddenly have this free space of discussion where we can just do everything that Zizek fetishizes. So telling jokes and the space of I would call it acquaintanceship really is what he's talking about. So not necessarily something that's at the level of family, but more in the direction of civil society, but where there's a certain freedom, less formality. So this is the zone that Zizek fetishizes, but he does it under a very specific character. This is basically under this sort of cosmopolitan attitude of a certain sort, which the professional classes have, which involved in a certain way a background of impersonal politeness, meaning the way people act at conferences and so on, or when giving lectures and going through various formalities. This attitude that Zizek subscribes to is basically the rich North Atlantic West attitude, as he describes in his beautiful little take on the walk from the Balkans to London. He basically occupies what I'm saying is what he's calling the move to the universal. Actually, he's already projecting himself as the universal position, and then he sees in the similar form as Ionescu's notion of is the the rhinoceros beautiful? Are the rhinoceros more beautiful than we are, etc., etc. He sees the other groups that could well enough do the same thing. So Dugin, for example, as ugly. So it's just to put it another way, if you're hate the political opponent, genuinely hate them, then you see them as stupid and ugly. So this would be obviously true of progressives or sort of Biden Democrats viewing, especially Biden Democrats, viewing Trump or viewing some forms of libertarian interests. They would see them as sort of, I don't know, like Russell said of Bismarck, he was considered to be an uneducated farmer, Prince Bismarck. And that, and what he meant was that people of the 19th century England were hoping that the forces of Goethe and Schiller would reassert themselves. But in this similar way, there's the same tendency to already to have universalized in such a way that's so natural that one scarcely notices it. So that's the core of the Zizek's racism, and then we could trace it out through these various positions in his human rights position, what he accepts, what he doesn't accept. So remember, let's look at this way. Gandhi, for instance, so we have a double moment with human rights. We have the French Revolution with the Rights of Man statement, but then we have after World War II, we have another statement on universal human rights. Gandhi had rejected this statement in the World War II period because he regarded it as private and individual rights as against rights which begin by thinking about the obligation one owes other people. And then this started a tradition, and there's, I don't know, Spivak and some other people in Bombay and some other places which continue this tradition. This shows that the court, even the court that Zizek takes, isn't the obvious position, but in a way he admits that. But then if we look at Zizek saying, I think we can show it more clearly here. If we look at what Zizek's saying is, there's two directions. So there's the Ami Cesar direction, where in the 20s there was an awareness of jazz and of Marcus Garvey and of some other phenomena which created a general black thing, so that people no longer thought, as W.D. Du Bois, I think, thought, let's be more like the universal culture, the talented tenth. One part of each group can amalgamate into this core, but rather he began to take this notion of alienation, which originally is part of the Marxist metaphysics, which is to say that the monopoly capitalism alienates you from some of what you're rightfully owed by a fair market, which would be run by the state. And this is, by the way, the meaning of the difference, why Marx is against private property. He thinks property must be overseen by the state, because otherwise you get monopoly capitalism and you get alienated from your just desserts. But he took, so Aimé Césaire took this alienation into the direction of the Dada movement, and then the idea is that you have something like a deeper stratum of the self, and it's something like you could think of it in an evolutionary biological way, as in Jung's phylogenetic unconscious, but some way that one could slough off the colonialist accruement, which Césaire, for him, the worst idea was sort of somebody who would become like Zizek in a way. Like, I think there's sort of a naive form of Zizek, and then there's a level up to Zizek himself, who is very informed, very well informed, and takes positions on everything, but is he actually aware of where he's standing? So the naive form of this, Césaire says, is there's an islander from the island. He's the French colonial possession, to which he grew up, and there's some small store clerk or something like that, and he's writing poems then to the big French journals. This is about 1930 or so, and then he gets published, and then he celebrates. He says, you see, they didn't even know that I was black, you see, and they still published it, and it's beautiful. And then so César's point is he thinks this is sort of similar to the Du Bois thing. He thinks, no, they have to rescue the primordial spirit of what he was calling negritude, and set it free on its own direction. So in a way, Zizek is strongly criticizing this kind of notion, but he says one the wound can only be cured by the spirit that smote it. Is this quote from Parsifal. The notion being the colonialism is the sphere, and then it's caused this alienation, but the only thing is then to again regain this Dubois and this Martinique islander who is so proud as not to be noticed what his actual identity is, but to have conformed to the style now going so well to the bon pensier, the good right thinking way so well as to win some prize in a literary magazine. Let me try to give the idea again. It's difficult to present the idea straightforwardly because it's in a way it's not, there's a fog around it. Let's present it in another way. It would be this: if we understand Marxist metaphysics by its own standard, we have to say the stranglehold over the Marxist metaphysics of all historiology, that all history is done by placing the economic forces in the center and thinking of them as the formative of the what comes afterwards, with some then special editions of the Weber prismatic forces or the great man history theory or some fringe issues which can't be explained, but generally that the core is to be explained by formation due to economic necessities, and that this accounts also for the ideology that's in control. But since Marxism itself is one of the main ideologies in control, this is like this universalization of itself, and the same way this Zizek misses his own position as a starting point, and he misses how much it distorts everything from that position in the same way as described by the rhinoceros of Ionescu.